What is going on, guys? Broken Machine here. Hope you guys are all doing good today. In this video, I'm bringing you guys a basic tutorial on positioning. Hopefully by incorporating what I go over today in your own gameplay, you'll die less often, not get shot in the back as much, improve your aim too, and have a much easier time on the battlefield. Good positioning is essentially about two things: gathering information about your opponents and what's going on around the map, and second, to counter your opponent in some way. These two are of course not separate, but if you're working on your skills, it may be helpful to think about them in that way for the time being. Let's have a look at a quick clip which demonstrates good positioning, so you can see what I'm talking about actually being used in a real game. So let's break it down. Firstly, I rush straight into this room. I've just been in here, so no need to check every corner. This guy comes rushing around, take him out swiftly, and his actions right there indicate there may be some enemies coming in from the left side. So in the hopes of not getting outnumbered and dying, now we need to reposition ourselves to gather information about the area to the left and try to counter them in some way. So I decide to stand in between these two machines in the hopes of using them as cover if I need to, and to be fairly safe while gathering information about this area. Next, I check right, teammates up there, no need to focus on that area anymore, look left, and again using positioning to gather information about the corridor ahead. Now this guy peeks out quickly just as I press reload. He's in the middle of throwing a nade next to me, so I reposition myself in the hopes of catching this guy off guard. So in the brief moment of that enemy going to cover, we use that window to reposition and gather information once again. Now that guy is nowhere to be found, possibly dead, so we go for the revive, they cancel, and look what happens next. A teammate gets taken out by an AT rocket, probably from the top of those stairs at the end of the corridor. The enemy here has given us their positioning, and we need to use that against them in some way. Now, same tactics, use the machines as cover, but this time we're going to challenge the enemy. Quick kill there, boom, done. So really simple example, but you see what I'm doing there? I'm using positioning to gather information and trying to counter the enemies. First engagement was to figure out the whereabouts of the enemy, the gathering information part, and the second, using their positioning against them, trying to counter them in some way. Now that is not really that difficult when you think about it, is it? That is essentially what good positioning is: information gathering and countering. Really simple. So for a map like that on Fort the Row, where you're constantly up against multiple opponents, it is vital you use positioning skills like that to your advantage. For the larger and more open maps, no need to think any differently. The same rules still apply. You just gotta use positioning to gather information and counter your opponents again and again. Now those are the two basic components of good positioning: gathering information and countering. Get them into your head. Next, we're going to look into one of the most important aspects of positioning, that is angle isolation. This is something many players are aware of to some extent. Clearly many are managing to subconsciously use it in their gameplays in various situations, but not quite in all of them. Angle isolation is where you consciously limit the number of angles you are exposed to. So for example, if you ran into this area here, you would be exposed to a guy in the main house, the barn, and any enemies that may spawn in and come into the area. So instead of just running out into the open, your best bet would be to not expose yourself to all of these angles at once. You could simply do this by moving from building to building, cover to cover, that kind of thing. Very simple, but incredibly effective. You don't have to move around as quickly as I am doing here, of course. You just need to make sure you break the map down into smaller pieces that are easily digestible, so you're not having to consider all the angles and expose yourself to far too many enemies. Obviously the maps are just too large to be able to predict what's going on all over them and at all times, but if you take each bit piece by piece and not expose yourself to the whole, you'll be more likely to survive, be able to gather information about the map ahead, and counter your opponents. Let's use another example to illustrate what I am talking about. This time a common situation you'll find yourself in, and that is corners. So corners, how do you approach them? Well, there's essentially 4 ways. Again, these aren't necessarily separate, you can combine them of course, but if you're you're trying to improve your gameplay, thinking about and working on them separately will probably help you out in the long run. So number 1, the tight corner. Great for close range classes, SMGs, shotguns, pistols, and aggressive plays. Not so great if there's areas ahead of you. Secondly, the wide corner. Great for medium and longer range weapons, medics, snipers, that kind of thing. Number 3, the safe way. Here you could approach the corner with a safe spot where you could run to if need be. And lastly, number 4, the information gatherer. Now this is the real skill. This is the guy that's going to catch you off guard and take you out. This is where you approach the corner with the idea of slicing the pie in mind. You take the corner piece by piece, peeking for enemies, taking them out if need be, and gather information about the map as you do so. So in this example, there's essentially 3 areas to look for. The head glitch spot here, the enemies down the back, and the enemies coming to the left. If you're not too sure where the enemy could be, or maybe you're on a new map that's just been released, this is the exact way you want to be playing them. Now I'm sure many of you are thinking, The Broken Machine, you clearly don't play like that all the time. Of course that is true, and that is because there are many other things in the game you can use to help decide where you're going to position yourself as you move around the map. Now the heads-up display is one of the most helpful. On the spawn screen here, you can see who holds the flags, and up here when you spawn in the game on the heads-up display right at the top, you can use this information to figure out where your enemies are most likely to come from and use that to help decide where you go. And you also have this massive minimap down here. I like it to be quite large on the screen, not too big though, just enough so that I can focus on it now and then, just a quick glance here and there, don't focus too much, and what I'm doing is essentially looking to see where my teammates are, any spotted enemies, which flags are around me, and using this information to decide where I may move next on the map and what kind of plays I may want to make. Don't get too distracted by this, you don't want to be glancing at it too often, just enough and when you have enough time to do so. Pause the video if you want to copy my settings. Now so far we've discussed some basic ideas about positioning. I hope it hasn't come across too complicated. It's really not. You've just got to keep 2 basic concepts in your head at all times. Information gathering and countering. Use your positioning as much as you can to gather information and counter your opponents. That is honestly what it's all about. Don't be a headless chicken just running about all over the place. Try and be conscious of what you're doing. Move with purpose. Also, crosshair placement. We've talked about this before, so I won't go into too much detail. Just try to be always thinking about where your crosshair is pointing. No need for it to be on the floor or in the sky, and don't place it too tight on corners. How quick do you think your reactions really are? Try and place it where you think you could react quickly to an enemy, too close to the corner, and you'll need to readjust if someone comes running by. Also, use positioning to try and get into 1v1s as much as possible. The game will be much easier if you try and do that. And if you follow what I've talked about today, you'll be more likely to be put into 1v1s. If you watch my own gameplay, you'll see that I survived the 1v2s, the 3s, the 4s and so on, not because of reactions or connection quality, but mostly because I was all ready to win a 1v1 by positioning alone. So once that's done, I'm already ready for the next opponent and anyone else who may be coming by. Now of course I may take risks here and there, but for the most part, if you break down what I'm doing on these massive kill streaks and objective moments, it's all about trying to get into 1v1s as much as possible. And finally, let's end with one of the best tips out there. If you don't want to get shot in the back constantly, stop putting empty spaces on the map behind you. There could be enemies there, they could use these open spaces to flank and get behind you, so don't allow them to. Really simple, but so many people make that mistake. Don't be that guy. It's not only just about you, it's going to help out your team as well, so keep that in mind. So that's it for today. I hope it's been good. Let me know what you think. Drop a like if you don't mind, share it and all that jazz. Of course, there's more to talk about, but let's end it there. Let's not drag this on for too long. Let me know what you think and I'll see you guys soon. Take it easy, guys. Catch you later.
The enemy has reached the final objective.
You see that?